Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 18th May 2024. Here we are to present to you this recap video for today's Bhagavad Gita study session. In our series on chapter 9, we're continuing from the early portion and progressing along a couple of verses at a time to see where we are now. Along with me for this recap video, here is Mummy.
Radhe Radhe.
Bringing up the screen, we're going to take a look and see that we covered chapter 9, verses 4 and 5 today. Prior to that, we went through the recap quiz covering the content from last time. That was for chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. As always, please look at the description for this video and go to the community portal page and get access to the slides you're seeing, as well as the quiz question that will be coming up shortly, and all other related material and announcements for your advantage and spiritual progress. So with that, we can now get into chapter 9, verse 4.
Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina matsthani sarva bhutani nachaham teshvavasthitaha.
Chapter 9, verse 4. The catchphrase here is encouragement or instructions, dwell upon it. Dwell in the sense we see from Sri Krishna momentarily that it's going to be about living or residing. Here it's dwell in terms of ponder, linger upon it, think about it. So what are we supposed to dwell upon? Sri Krishna says the entire cosmic manifestation is pervaded by him. We talked about that in class and reminded everyone about omnipresence. God is everywhere and he has pervaded, he pervades, he permeates everything. And that's in the unmanifest form. All of us as living beings dwell or live in him, but he does not dwell in us. How is that to be explained? Swamiji has described in the commentary that the Vedic philosophy doesn't accept this concept of, as we said in class, peekaboo. God has created the world and then just kind of like hide and seek. He's looking at it periodically and checking to see if everything's fine. No. Omnipresence means God has pervaded and permeated everything. And there are examples from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the Ishopanishad, and the Purush Suktam as examples that Swamiji gives. God pervades everything that has existed and all that will exist. And in contrast, Swamiji helps us also understand why two other philosophies are not completely correct. One being that of Parinamvad, which is that God has transformed into the world. As an analog, for instance, milk gets transformed by combining with acid into yogurt. That is not completely true. And likewise, the concept that the world is a mistake, mistakenly seen as an object that's something different, vivarta, that's also not the case. The examples given were that of a rope and a snake, for instance. We talked about Tulsidas Goswami, of course, benefiting from that, misconception at some stage. But here, back to the crux, we saw in chapter 7 at length, and Swamiji reminds us here, chapter 7, verse 4, chapter 7, verse 5, introduction to those different energies, and conclusive deduction that the world is neither parinam, so not a transformation of God, nor vivarta, not something that we are mistakenly seeing as one thing for another. All this is from the energy of God. And we learned in this verse two energies. We'll see the third one in the next verse. So we have the material energy, Prakriti, Maya Shakti, and then we have the superior soul energy, Jeev Shakti. All these are energies of God used for creation, but also used in this case as part of God's personality. They're all part of God. So yes, we as living beings do dwell in God, but then God, because he is infinite, you cannot pack the infinite in a finite sense or space or volume. God, therefore, of course, doesn't dwell in us living beings. The example given to visually remember is that of the ocean and its waves. Take many, many waves of an ocean, take all the waves, add them up. Their sum, their SUM, is not equivalent to the ocean. The ocean is much, much larger and expansive. So likewise, we waves of the living world cannot add up, of course, to the transcendental ocean of God. As a reminder, you all saw that through the class flyer. So again, remember here, and then the play on words, sum, S-U-M below, but then sum, S-O-M-E, sum total. That's just a phrase, for exclamation. Indeed, what is the sum total of all the waves of an ocean? We know for sure it's less than the ocean itself. Therefore, we living beings cannot, of course, add up to God, and therefore, God doesn't dwell in us. Next up, we'll see chapter 9, verse 5.
न च मत्स्थानि भूतानि पश्य मे योगम् ऐश्वरम् भूतभृन्न च भूतस्थो ममात्मा भूतभावनः.
So chapter 9, verse 5, another synonym, a different word for living or dwelling. Here it's abide, but the use is different. Here the catchphrase is abide by me. So that is because in this chapter, Sri Krishna next says that we do not abide in God. Chapter 9, verse 5. So here the encouragement is abide by God. So let's act and live in accordance with God's instructions and guidance. How does that happen? So chapter 9, verse 5, Sri Krishna says that despite all that, what he said in chapter 9, verse 4, yet the living beings do not abide in him. Why? He explains because that is to be understood or beheld as the mystery of his divine energy, that third energy. And so Sri Krishna adds that although he is the creator and sustainer of all living beings, he's not influenced by them or by material nature. So again, we had Maya Shakti, we had Jeev Shakti, and now a reminder again from chapter 7, Yog Maya, that third extra powerful, special, God's all-powerful divine energy. The one that we've also heard of often as Radha, the Divine Mother, and the other manifestations, the other names we're familiar with, and the energy that lets God sit undisturbed while the world, etc., everything is continuing to function and work correctly. So again, Swamiji tells us that God is seated in our hearts. We mentioned we'll see that in a subsequent chapter, approximately halfway through chapter 10, and yet we have no perception of him. And that's because Yogmaya, Mummy mentioned that, right? It's like this layer, it's like a curtain, it's a veil. It keeps us away from God. Yogmaya keeps us aloof from God. Likewise, God is not disturbed or influenced by what we are doing. And so an example from the Bhagavatam, Maya is embarrassed to stand in front of God or before God. All this is because of Yogmaya. And Swamiji says to help conclude and make that deduction, if we living beings or collectively the world could influence God, then when the world's destroyed or decayed, God's personality or nature would also deteriorate. Clearly that doesn't happen. So a new term we learned is to understand from the Vedas how God is called or known as Dashanguli, 10 fingers, meaning here not physically 10 finger lengths distant away, but the concept, the metaphor being that God is untouched by the world. So that is the essence here for why then Sri Krishna in chapter 9, verse 5 says, why living beings do not abide in him. Mommy, I'll pass it over to you for additional content.
So let's first talk about 2-3 important Sanskrit words in these two verses. First one I want everybody to take note of is tatam. Tatam means something that pervades. It is all pervaded. What is pervaded? That is Avyakt Murtina. Avyakt Murtina, that is the unmanifested form. That unmanifested form which is so subtle, that is pervading all of us, all the living beings, the whole of universe. That is what Krishna is saying. Krishna is saying, Eko Devaha Sarva Bhuteshu Godaha Sarva Vyapi Isha Vasayam Idam Sarvam Yat Kinch Jagatayayam Jagata Purusha Evedamam Sarvam Yat Bhutam Yach Bhavyam. So God is pervading everything. God is everywhere. So first we learned in the previous chapters that God is seated in our hearts, right? So there is one our individual soul, and there is a supreme soul. Today we are learning even a deeper meaning of that God is all pervading. God is the way we have, if we have seen the clay pots, they are made of clay, right? But then what you feel, the clay is not sitting inside. They are made of clay. Similarly, we are made of that Sat Chit Anand, unlimited, pure, everlasting consciousness bliss. So God is pervading all over us, all living beings everywhere. Verse number 5, there's a very important word, Yogam Aishwaram. So now Krishna is saying that there is, we all know material Shakti, Maya Shakti, and then there is Jiva Shakti, that is the soul energy. Now, beyond that, Krishna has a very special energy, Yogam Aishwaram, that is the divine energy, and that all-powerful energy can make the impossible possible. So that is what we have to understand, that God is pervading us, pervading the whole universe. Okay? But still, he is infinite. He cannot be contained in us who are finite. And that is why he is called the Shanguli. He is far, far, far ahead of us, which we cannot even touch him. So basically, this is what we have to understand, that our nature is also same, Sat Chit Anand, and God is also Sat Chit Anand, and he is pervading all of us. And that is why we souls are all the time looking for that eternal happiness, which we have understood in previous chapters, that is only in God. So through practices of many tools given to us for bhakti, we can slowly inch towards feeling that Sat Chit Anand that we get from God. Over to you, Gagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mummy. And I'll just add, as I mentioned in class, the Dashangli, not the 10-finger concept here, but the 2-finger width length that we had talked about in the slides. We'll have a link in that in your spare time section with additional material that we hope you all are looking at. We'll put a video that has a nice story, a sweet Leela from the Bhagavatam that will be about 2-finger widths. So again, keep that in mind, because again, it'll help you understand how God has these divine energies that power the Yogmaya. He's there yet so near yet so far, right? As they often say. So keep that in mind. The other thing, we didn't get time in class to mention this, but I thought about it is, the Shanguli is truly, I think, meant to be 10-finger lengths. Fine. So physically, it's like that from the Vedas. But think about this as well. Our hands, we have 10 fingers combined. So think of them not as stacked one on the other, but just think of them like this. If we don't have, the hands outright upward, just say we're over here, like just look at the wrist, for instance. All we need to do perhaps would be get that distance covered, which is of, in this case, 10 fingers, not the length of 10 fingers, but the equivalent of just our hands, which combine 10 fingers or span 10 fingers. So near yet so far. All these steps, as Mummy said, of bhakti, that increasing bliss, the anand that one gets through these practices, can perhaps and certainly will, as Sri Krishna says, maybe not this lifetime, maybe a different one, they'll get us to him and into him. So something to think about. We meet as always next time. That's Saturday, 25th May, 2024. 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time. Till then, thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe.